Hello everyone and welcome back to Just Finish Coding. This is part 5 of our endless runner game which we're making on Scratch 3. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Just finished coding.
Now I have to interject here that if you've not watched parts 1 to 4, please watch them before you come here because as you can see I'm picking up from where I left off. And for this video to make sense, you need to watch the previous ones. I will leave a card for you right here. Please watch the videos and then come right back. If you're still here, then I'm going to assume that you've watched parts 1 to 4, in which case let's continue with our code. So in the last video, what I did was I customized the explosion and I made sure that a couple of things disappeared to give way to the end screen. In this video, I'll be changing and tweaking a little bit of bugs, and then what I'll do is I'll go into the score sprite and make sure we have a sort of working score system. So let's start. First of all, within our log, I made a small mistake in the last video. When we receive game over, we don't really hide. But what we need to do instead is to delete the clones. So just say delete this clone and every single clone is going to receive this game over message. So they're all going to delete themselves except the sprite itself. The reason we don't want to use hide is because in case we hide, then the clones are still going to be occupying space on the RAM, which isn't really a good thing. So we just want them to be deleted. So after you're done with this, you can head over to the ground and I just want to add in a couple of coordinates here. So once we start, we need to make it go right at the front. So add in go to front layer so that it doesn't show up, behind the logs. We want it to show in front. So add in a go to front layer and after that, we could just go to one position, that is x0, y negative 170. And that's it. We don't really even have to add in any more additional code. Next, what you can do is go over to this play again button because this is what we'll be coding next. And this is probably what I wanted to do in the last video, but I just decided against doing. So let's start this. So when we receive init, what we'll do is we will hide ourselves. So when we receive init, we will hide. And after this, what's important is to make sure that when we receive game over, we show pretty much at the center, a little below the center, but almost at the center. So when we receive game over, I will go to this particular position, which is x0, y negative 20. I will wait for a small fraction, which is before the end screen switches. So wait 0.3 seconds. And after I'm done waiting with that, I am just going to show myself. So add in a show. And that's it we need for the end screen itself. So let's just test this out quickly. The cat is running. Let's wait until the log comes along. Boom, explosion, and we have a play again. But when we click on it, we want to make sure that we restart the whole game. And to do that, we need to change something very fundamental within our stage. So the program starts when the green flag is clicked, and we want to change that. We don't want to start when the green flag is clicked. What we need to do instead is to start when we receive a message. So say a new message, and I'm going to call this restart. You could call this anything you want. Just makes sense to call it restart because we're restarting the game even at the beginning. So when we receive restart, we'll do all of that, and we will be broadcasting restart from the play again button. So when the sprite is clicked, what I will do is I will broadcast restart. Now this is what's going to happen. So when we broadcast restart, the stage is going to receive restart and then it's going to broadcast init, which in turn is going to make the sprite hide. So the moment we click it, boom, it's going to hide. The problem here is that nothing broadcast, restart when the green flag is clicked, and we need to do that manually within our play again sprite. So when the green flag is clicked, once again, I will broadcast restart, and that is pretty much it. So now let's hit the green flag and let's close. Okay, the thumbnail works. And let's just wait until the cat hits a log. So boom, we hit a log, I click play again, and boom, the whole game starts over again. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. And now we can head over to the main scoring system. So click on the score sprite. This is where we'll be doing most of the changes. Let's start with the init. So when we receive init, what we need to do is first of all hide and delete any existing clones that are there. Now, if we just add in or delete this clone, the problem is we can't add in code after that. So to bypass this, we can just add in a repeat 1 or just a blank if. I think repeat 1 is better. We delete this clone, and after that we need to create our clones. To do that, I'm going to do it under a custom block. So I'm going to call this block init clones, not run. I'm not going to run without screen refresh. Just click OK, and you can just throw in that block after delete this clone. So very simple. And now within variables, we need to create a private variable. This one is going to be called clone ID, which gives each clone an ID, including the sprite itself. So at the beginning, let's set clone ID to 1. We're going to have 5 different clones, and I'll explain how the clone IDs work. Don't worry about that. So clone ID to 1. After that, we can repeat 5 times and create a clone with a different ID each time. So repeat 5. We can say create clone of myself, and after that we will change clone ID by 1. After we're done with all of this, I'm going to set clone ID to 0 so that we can identify the sprite itself, which will have a clone ID of 0, and each of the clones which have a clone ID of 1 to 5. So this is going to be it for this init. The main thing starts in the tick. So head over to events, grab a when I receive, and you can change game over to not init, but to tick. So when we receive tick, first of all, we can check with a series of if else's. What we first need to check if the clone ID is 0. So in case we know that the clone ID of this particular sprite or the particular clone is equal to 0, then we're basically just going to hide. We're not going to do anything for the sprite. It's just the clones that are going to be doing all the work. So hide. And in case the clone ID is not 0, then it means that the object in question is not the sprite, but it is a clone. So since it is a clone, we need to make sure that we go to the correct position. So grab a go to here, and this is a bit tricky. So just follow me along. Head over to operators first, grab a plus, then throw in a multiplied by, and then throw in a minus right at the beginning. So like this, and you can fill it up this way. So I'm going to say go to x120. After that, you can grab a clone ID from variables, throw it in here, say -1, and after that you can multiply this by 20. And within our y, I'm just going to go ahead with 176, but you can change the y position if you want the clone to be a little more up or a little more down, depending on your choice. So now let me explain this. It's fairly simple. This 20 here is basically the difference in width, okay? So if you head over to the costumes here, you can see that we have a 0. The difference between the left end of the 0 and the right end of the 0 is basically 20 scratch pixels. That's why we need the 20. So when we're arranging the numbers together, each one is going to be situated 20 pixels away, which is why each and every clone is going to move by 20 pixels. That is fairly simple, and I'm going to assume you understood that. 120 on the other hand is the starting x coordinate which we're going to use, which I believe is somewhere along the screen here. So x240 is at the end here, so it's about halfway to 240. It must be about this point, okay? Now clone ID, this is where things get a little bit tricky. Why are we using clone ID -1? Now the clones work in a pretty peculiar way. So the first clone is going to be the one at the 10,000th decimal place. And the fifth clone, and by fifth clone I mean clone with clone ID 5, is going to be the one at the ones place. So the fifth clone is going to be situated as right as possible, and the first one is going to be situated as left as possible. Now I've chosen 120 as the starting position for the first clone, in this case the one which has the 10,000 decimal place, clone ID 1. So when clone ID is 1, it's going to go right to that location, and when clone ID is 5, the X position is going to get maximized to the right, which is exactly what we want. Now I hope you understood that. If you didn't, just listen to it again, and if you still have a doubt, just comment down below. I will try my best to explain it. Okay, so after we're done with this, what we can do is grab another if else, okay? So one more if else, we're going to have quite a few conditions here. So in this if else, we'll be grabbing a less than from the operators category, or a greater than, whichever way you want to think about this, and we'll be putting in a variable called score. So create a new variable, I'll call it score. We can hide it and just throw it in. So now head over to the stage, let's set it properly. When we receive restart, it's a public variable, so set score to 0. That's what we need at the beginning. Now let's come back to score. So if score is greater than 99999, so this is beyond the score here. Our score can only hold 5 decimal digits. So in this case, what we'll do is just freeze the score like that. So let's just say set the costume to, or rather just switch costume to 9. We'll just make sure that everything stays at 9 to show that the score is maxed. Now within the else statement, we'll once again need an if else. Okay, so grab an if else from the control section. This time what we need to do is we will need to check if the score actually applies to that particular clone. So for example, we wouldn't want the 10,000th clone to show any number but 0 when the score is only, for example, 5. We'd want only the clone in the units place to be showing 5 in its costume. All the other clones need to be set to costume 0. And that's the whole point. So to do that, things are a bit tricky, but they hopefully would be self-explanatory. So we'll first check if the length of the score, so first of all grab a less or greater than, okay? And within the right side, I'll fill that first. So grab a length of and just throw in score like this. So if the length of the score is greater than, now grab a minus from operators and you can say 6 minus clone ID, 6 minus clone ID. If this is the case, then what we need to do is switch costume to 0. So switch costume to 0. There we go. That is going to be it. So what does this mean? Let's just take, for example, the clone with clone ID 1. This is going to be the 10,000th place. So if the length of score is, let's just say, only 1, which means it's, the score is somewhere between 1 and 9. In this case, we obviously wouldn't want the 10,000th clone to be showing anything. I mean, we'd want that clone to just stay as 0, which is what this does. Clone ID is going to be 6 minus 1, which is 5. And that's more than the length of score in this case, which would be only 1. Now each clone is going to be different. So for the 5th clone, which is on the units place, this relation is not going to be true, and hence we will switch the costume to the correct costume, which I'll get into. But the important thing is we'll set the other costumes to 0, which is exactly what this does. So I'm going to assume this was fairly simple. And after this, we need to have one final else. Okay, so you can grab a switch costume once again, and here this is where things are probably the most complicated. So you can grab a letter off. Okay, so grab a letter off from operators, letter 1 off. Yep, there we go. You can change this to letter clone ID. Just follow me along here. You don't worry about what's going on with the code. Just be a little bit careful. Okay, now within this clone ID itself, actually you don't need to do it this way. You need to grab in another minus. So grab in a minus, put it within the letter. So within this first minus, put in clone ID, and within that minus we need to put in another minus. So minus once more like this, and here what we need to say is 5 minus length of score. So length of score, and I'm going to just duplicate this variable here, throw in score like this, and then I will throw in score once again here at the end. So just to be clear, we have a letter, and then this whole thing is within that letter 1 off. So we have clone ID minus within parentheses, imaginary parentheses here, 5 minus the length of score. Okay, just put this in. This is going to make sure that the score switches costume to the correct costume. Now, how does this work? So let's just take it for the units place. So clone ID is going to be 5, and let's just say the length of the score is, let's say, 8. Okay, the length of score is going to be 1. So in this case, we'll be switching letter to 5 minus length of score. This is going to be 4, and clone ID, which is 5 minus 4, this is going to be 1. We just switch it to letter 1 of score. Perfect. We switch the costume to an 8 for the units place, and that's going to be the only place for which this condition is not true. For the rest of the digits, this condition is going to be true, and those clones aren't going to be set to any costume other than 0. So let's take this for another case. Let's take the tens place of a score, let's say 15. So in this case, clone ID is going to be 4, and the length of score is going to be 2. So we're going to have 5 minus 2, which is 3. Clone ID is 4. Now in this case we'll have letter 1 of 15, but remember we're dealing with the tens place here and not with the ones place. So since we're dealing with the tens place, the letter we need is 1 and not 5, and hence we switch the costume to the correct costume once again. Now you could verify this for each and every number. This thing works pretty well, and that's the whole point, right? We'd want it to work well. So after we're done with all of this, what I'm going to do is just add in a show basically, because if we are switching the costume to something, we will want to show it. So grab a go to front layer, and you can also grab a show. So throw in a show and a go to front layer right off out of these two if else's. So if we are going to a position, we will be showing ourselves. And that is the whole point. So the last thing we need to do is making sure that the score is actually changing, because at this point the score is just remaining at 0, and that obviously serves no purpose. So within the stage itself, when we receive a tick, I will change the score by 1. Very simple. I won't even be getting into the high score and stuff like that now. Just have the score set up. Now I'm going to hit the green flag, and boom, you can see that the score at the top is constantly changing, and that's pretty great. That is exactly what we want. In the next video, what I will be doing is I will be making sure that the high score works as well, and we also have a little cloud which makes the score look a little bit more little bit better aesthetically. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, and also don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.